There existed a chapter in your story where the person you trusted most acted from a place of profound disconnection from their authentic self. Their behavior was shrouded in layers of deception and calculated concealment, leaving you standing in the aftermath of confusion, your heart shattered into fragments that seemed impossible to piece back together. The pain wasn't just in what they did, but in how they did it, with a level of sneakiness that made you question not only their character but your own ability to read people, to trust your instincts, to believe in the goodness you thought you saw in them. Their words became weapons, carefully crafted with bitterness that seemed to seep from some wounded place within them, yet delivered with a carelessness that suggested your feelings were expendable. Each conversation became a minefield where you never knew which step might trigger an explosion of cruelty. They spoke to you in ways that stripped away your dignity, piece by piece, using tones that were not just unkind but deliberately calculated to diminish you. Their words carried the weight of cruelty that seemed to emerge from a deep well of their own unhealed pain, yet they wielded it against you with precision that left no doubt about their intent to make you feel small, insignificant, and fundamentally unworthy of the love you had so freely given. The burden of those moments became a constant companion, those poisonous words echoing in your mind long after they were spoken. They carved deep grooves into your heart, leaving scars that would throb with memory at unexpected moments. The bruises they left on your spirit weren't visible to the outside world, but you carried them like invisible chains, feeling their weight with every step you took. What made the pain even more unbearable was the systematic way they dismissed your emotions, as if your feelings were inconvenient obstacles to their agenda rather than valid responses to their hurtful behavior. They made you feel as though your pain was an overreaction, your hurt was imagined, and your need for respect and kindness was somehow unreasonable. This toxic pattern that emerged between you was fueled by their unchecked ego, their stubborn pride that refused to bend even when love demanded flexibility, and an emotional immaturity that manifested in their inability to take responsibility for the harm they caused. The combination of these elements created a perfect storm that gradually eroded your mental and emotional well-being. You found yourself questioning your own reality, wondering if perhaps you were too sensitive, too demanding, too much. The gaslighting was subtle but persistent, like a slow poison that made you doubt your own perceptions and worth. But now, in the quiet aftermath of all that destruction, something profound has begun to shift within them. Like a person awakening from a long, troubled sleep, they're beginning to see with clarity that had been obscured by their own defensive mechanisms and unhealed wounds. For perhaps the first time in their life, they're truly comprehending the devastating depth of the pain they inflicted upon you. This awakening isn't gentle or gradual, it's hitting them with the force of a revelation that shakes them to their very core. They're finally seeing how their behavior, their choices, their words created a chasm between you that grew wider with each passing day until you had no choice but to step back from the edge and choose your own peace over the chaos they brought into your life. This realization isn't coming from external pressure or someone else pointing out their flaws. It's an internal reckoning, a spiritual awakening that's emerging from the depths of their own soul. They've begun the painful but necessary process of self-reflection, turning their gaze inward to examine everything they did, every word they spoke, every action they took, and honestly assessing how each of these affected you. The weight of this self-examination is crushing them with its truth. In those vulnerable moments of solitude, when the noise of the world fades away and they're left alone with their thoughts, they find themselves compulsively drawn to your photographs, scrolling through images that capture moments of happiness you once shared. In these quiet hours of reflection, they're searching desperately for some trace of what they've lost, some visual reminder of the love that once existed between you. Each photograph becomes a window into a past they took for granted, a testament to what their ego and pride cost them. The truth they're confronting is brutal in its simplicity. They let you down in the most fundamental way possible. They had someone who cared for them with a depth and authenticity that was rare and precious, someone who offered their heart freely and completely, and they responded by taking that gift for granted. The mistake of letting you go, or more accurately, of pushing you away through their toxic patterns of behavior, now haunts them with a clarity that's almost unbearable. They can see now that it didn't have to end in such destruction. The relationship could have been healed, could have grown stronger, could have become something beautiful if only they had possessed the emotional maturity to meet you where you were instead of dragging you down to where they were stuck. Despite the physical and emotional distance that now exists between you, despite the walls that were built through pain and necessary self-protection, they find themselves inexplicably and powerfully drawn to you still. The magnetic pull they feel hasn't diminished with time. If anything, it has intensified, becoming a constant ache in their chest that reminds them of what they've lost. Their mind drifts to you constantly now, in quiet moments when their defenses are down, sometimes filled with longing so intense it takes their breath away, sometimes heavy with guilt that sits like a stone in their stomach. They find themselves fantasizing about being close to you again, imagining what it would feel like to share not just physical intimacy but that deeper emotional and spiritual connection that once existed between you. But this isn't merely about desire or physical attraction, though those feelings remain strong and undeniable. This is about something much more profound, the desperate need to reconnect with someone they now recognize as essential to their spiritual and emotional completion. They're beginning to understand that you weren't just someone they loved, you were someone who made them better, who brought out the best version of themselves, who saw through their facades to the person they could become. There's a part of them that aches with the intensity of their longing for a second chance, a part that would give anything to undo the damage they caused and prove that they're capable of being different, of being better. They're beginning to feel an urgent, almost desperate need to make things right between you. The guilt that they once managed to suppress or ignore has now become a constant companion, following them through their days and haunting their nights, tugging relentlessly at their conscience, urging them to find the courage to take full accountability for their actions. They spend countless hours thinking about how they might begin to compensate for the pain they've caused, particularly the emotional turmoil of those final days which seem to weigh most heavily on their heart. They're coming to understand that the wounds they inflicted can't be healed with simple apologies or empty promises. They realize that words, no matter how carefully chosen or sincerely delivered, may not be enough to bridge the canyon their behavior created between you. The magnitude of what they need to do is becoming clear to them. They would need to demonstrate through consistent actions, not just speak through pretty words, that they've undergone a fundamental transformation. They would need to show you that they're willing to do the deep, difficult work of rebuilding not just the trust they shattered, but the very foundation of who they are as a person. They're beginning to understand that healing what was broken between you would require nothing less than a complete reconstruction of their character, their communication patterns, and their capacity for emotional intimacy. What they never anticipated, however, was the incredible transformation that would occur within you during this time of separation. After enduring so much pain, after giving so much of yourself while receiving so little in return, you finally reached a breaking point that became a breakthrough. But instead of remaining trapped in the familiar cycle of pain, instead of continuing to wait for them to change or chase after apologies that might never come, you made a choice that changed everything. You chose to release it all, the hurt, the anger, the desperate need for closure, the exhausting mental loops that kept you trapped in the past. You stopped the endless cycle of overthinking that had consumed your energy for so long. You stopped chasing answers that might never come, apologies that might never be sincere, or closure that you realized could only come from within yourself. In a moment of profound spiritual surrender, you handed this entire connection over to the divine, trusting with absolute faith that what is truly meant for you will not pass you by, and what is not meant for you will naturally fall away. This surrender wasn't an act of giving up or defeat, it was a powerful declaration of your inherent worth and value as a human being deserving of love, respect, and kindness. You stepped fully into your own strength and chose yourself with a conviction that surprised even you. You chose your peace over their chaos, your growth over their stagnation, your future over their past. This shift in your energy, this reclaiming of your power, has shocked your person to their very core. They never expected you to find this kind of emotional resilience and spiritual strength. For so long, they had grown accustomed to you being available whenever they needed you, endlessly giving and forgiving, always there to absorb their emotional storms and provide comfort even when they offered none in return. They operated under the assumption that you would always be there, no matter how badly they treated you, no matter how many times they took your love for granted. They thought your love was unconditional to the point of being inexhaustible, that you would continue to accept whatever scraps of affection they chose to offer while tolerating their toxic behavior indefinitely. Seeing you grow, watching you evolve into someone stronger, wiser, and more emotionally balanced has forced them to confront their own shortcomings in a way that's impossible to ignore or rationalize away. Your transformation is holding up a mirror to their soul, and the reflection they see is uncomfortable and undeniable. They can no longer hide behind excuses or blame external circumstances for their behavior. Your growth has illuminated exactly who they've been and how far they still need to travel on their own journey of healing and self-improvement. The person you've become, confident, grounded, spiritually aligned, stands in stark contrast to the person they remain, and this comparison is forcing them to face truths about themselves they've spent years avoiding. Now they're left grappling with a fear that grows stronger each day, the terrifying possibility that they may have lost you forever. There's a growing anxiety within them that you've outgrown not just the pain they caused, but the version of them that was capable of causing such pain in the first place. They're beginning to worry that you may no longer see them as worthy of your love, your time, or your energy. The dynamic between you has shifted so completely that they hardly recognize it, and now they find themselves in the unfamiliar position of being the one who needs to prove themselves worthy of your attention. They want desperately to reach out to you, to explain themselves, to offer apologies and promises of change, but they're plagued by uncertainty about whether their words would even matter anymore. They're coming to understand that you've moved beyond the place where their explanations or justifications hold power over your emotional state. The person you've become might listen to their words, but you're no longer dependent on hearing them for your own peace and happiness. The balance of power has shifted dramatically, and now it rests firmly in your hands. You've found your footing again, discovered your own strength, and learned to source your happiness from within rather than from their approval or affection. Meanwhile, they're still struggling to figure out how to rebuild what they so carelessly destroyed, still learning how to become the person they should have been all along. Whether or not they return to your life with genuine, lasting change remains to be seen. The jury is still out on whether their current self-reflection will translate into real transformation or whether this is just another temporary phase in their pattern of behavior. But regardless of what they do or don't do, one thing has become absolutely certain: you have reclaimed your power in the most beautiful and complete way possible. In choosing yourself, in surrendering the outcome to divine timing and divine will, you've rewritten the ending to a story that once brought you nothing but pain and confusion. You are no longer the person who waited in silence, hoping they would finally choose you over their ego and their fears. You've chosen yourself with such completeness and conviction that you've become magnetic in your wholeness. And that choice, that reclaiming of your own worth and value, represents your greatest victory, not over them, but for yourself and your own happiness. The truth they're now confronting is that without you, life feels fundamentally incomplete, as though some vital piece of their soul has gone missing. It's as if you were a part of them that they didn't fully appreciate until it was gone, leaving behind an emptiness that nothing else can fill. From the very first moment they laid eyes on you, something shifted deep within their being. There was an instant recognition, as though their soul had been searching and finally found its match in you. It wasn't merely physical attraction, though that was certainly present and powerful. This was something that reached into the depths of their spiritual being, something that felt like coming home after a long journey through foreign lands. They didn't fully understand the magnitude of what they were experiencing in those early days, but now, In hindsight, they can see it clearly for what it truly was, the beginning of a love that would grow to become the most significant and transformative experience of their life. They fell for you with an intensity that surprised them, harder and faster than they had ever thought possible or safe. The love they felt for you became so deep and all-encompassing that you began to feel like an essential part of their identity, their daily existence, their very breath. That kind of profound, soul-deep love can be extraordinarily beautiful, but it can also trigger deep fears and insecurities in someone who isn't emotionally prepared to handle such intensity. And somewhere along the way, their fear began to overpower their love. The fear of losing you became so overwhelming that it transformed them into someone they never wanted to become, someone controlling, manipulative, and consumed by insecurities that poisoned every interaction between you. Looking back now with the painful clarity that only hindsight can provide, they struggled to find words adequate to express the depth of their regret for those dark moments in your relationship. They can see now with devastating clarity how damaging their behavior was, not only to you and your sense of safety and trust, but to the beautiful love you were building together. They understand now that their attempts to control the relationship, to manage outcomes through manipulation rather than trust, only succeeded in pushing you further away from them instead of creating the security and closeness they desperately wanted. Their heart aches with the weight of that regret, a physical pain that seems to live permanently in their chest. They replay moments over and over, wishing they could go back and respond differently, speak with kindness instead of fear, choose trust over control. They know they hurt you deeply with their words, their actions, and perhaps most painfully of all, with their consistent inability to truly listen to you and be fully present in your relationship. They broke your trust, something they now recognize as sacred and fragile, something that should have been protected and honored above all else. The realization that trust isn't something to be taken for granted has hit them like a revelation. They understand now that trust is something precious that must be earned daily through consistent actions and words, something to be protected and cherished and never, ever weaponized. And they failed spectacularly in that responsibility. Every attempt they made to force outcomes or manipulate situations ended up creating exactly the opposite of what their heart truly desired. All they really wanted was for your relationship to work, for your love to last, for you to be happy together. But their methods were so fundamentally flawed that they achieved the exact opposite result. There's a part of them, a darker, more wounded part, that they desperately didn't want you to see during your relationship. This shadow side of their personality contained all their deepest fears, their unhealed traumas, their insecurities and wounds that they hadn't yet learned how to address in healthy ways. They tried so desperately to keep this part of themselves hidden because they were terrified of what you might think if you saw them in their full, flawed humanity. They were afraid that if you witnessed their weaknesses, their brokenness, their fear, you would decide they weren't worth loving and walk away. So instead of being vulnerable and authentic, they chose to hide behind masks. They lied about their struggles, pretended to have everything under control, and presented a false version of themselves that they thought would be more acceptable to you. But the truth is that beneath all those carefully constructed facades, they were struggling intensely. They were battling with the constant fear of losing you, of not being good enough for someone as wonderful as you, of not measuring up to the kind of love you deserve to receive. In their misguided attempt to avoid facing those inner battles and unhealed wounds, they sought distractions and diversions that took them away from the real work they needed to do. They veered off course from their authentic path, got involved in activities and behaviors that didn't serve their highest good or honor the love they shared with you. In doing so, they lost sight of who they truly were beneath all the fear and pain, and they lost sight of what really mattered, your relationship, your happiness, their own growth and healing. They tried to numb the pain they were feeling, thinking it would make everything easier to handle. But all their attempts at numbing and distraction accomplished was to make the distance between you grow even wider. They drifted further away from you, from the relationship you were trying to build together, and most tragically, from their own authentic self. They became a stranger to themselves, operating from wounded patterns rather than from love and consciousness.